The young brother was downright eloquent with his misinformed soliloquy. He said using nigger affectionately among ourselves takes the negativity out of the word, but that no other race of people can use it ever but us. And you thought that kind of reasoning existed only in the Twilight Zone. Then again, the Twilight Zone was a TV show, and the plight of Black America is tragic reality. Somebody said the revolution would not be televised. They didn't say anything about our devolution, which is well documented.
If you have race pride and love your race, join the Moorish Science Temple of America and become a part of this divine movement. Then you will have power to redeem your race because you'll know who you are and who your forefathers were. Because where there's unity, there is strength. Together we stand, and divided we fall. Come, good people, because the Prophet Noble Jew Ali sent to redeem this nation from mental slavery, which you now have, need each and every one of you who think that your conditions can be better. This is a field open to strong men and women to uplift the nation and take your place in the affairs of men. If the European and other nations are helping him, why not you? It is your problem. The Negro problem is being solved only as it can, and that is through the Moorish National Divine Movement. If you have a nation, you must have a free national name in order to be recognized by this nation as an American citizen. This is what was meant when it was said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish American prayer, the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. First off, I'd like to rise, walking in Jerusalem, just like John, giving praise to Allah, the author, the creator, the governor of the world, almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible, the one who stretches forth the heaven with his hands, who have described with his fingers the courses of the stars, who set it bound to the ocean that it cannot pass, and said to the stormy winds, be still. I'd like to give honor to the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star, talking none other than our holy and the luscious prophet, Noble Jew Ali. I'd like to give honor to Brother Prophet, because it was he who reached down into the watery grave of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and the beast, and set you and me back upright on our feet again. I'd like to give honor to the forerunner to the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, Marcus Mosai Garvey. I'd like to give honor to Marcus Mosai Garvey because this brother had to have pure thoughts in order to pave the way for love. I'd like to give honor to all officials in the Moorish Science Temple of America, here, there, and everywhere. I'd like to give honor to all literature pertaining to Islam in the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'd like to give honor to our two flags, the flag of our origin and the flag of our birth, and honor to our charter that gives us the right to function in these United States and throughout the world without molestation or ridicule of any kind. I'd like to give honor to all of those and honor to all of you that have and will aid and assist us in this, our divine and gigantic mission, the uplifting of fallen humanity. And last but not least, I'd like to give a special honor to Temple number 2 here in Portland, Oregon, for your wills and your ways. Praise Allah and honor to the Prophet, Noble Jew Ali. At this time, I'd like to read from the Moorish Holy Quran. The book of the seven seals, the one that they talk about in Revelations that none was able to read from its sacred pages, the messages of purity and love, the book of the seven seals. And I like to read from chapter 40. Chapter 40, page 49. And the title of the chapter that I'm going to read from this evening is The Holy Instructions from the Prophet, the Instability of Man. Now I'm going to read from this chapter because Noble Drew Ali gave us the Moorish Holy Quran, for our earthly and our divine salvation. And he gave us the literature in the temple. So temple Moors read the Quran because it is through the Moorish Holy Quran and the literature that Noble Drew Ali brought us that put you back in tune with the great God Allah. Because through carnal thoughts and words and deeds, man tore himself away from Allah. He debased himself. So if you debase yourself from Allah, it's only because you're not studying the book of the seven seals. So I'm going to read from verse 1 in this chapter, and it reads on this wise. Inconstancy is powerful in the heart of man. Intemperance sweareth it whither it will. Despair engrowtheth much of it, and fear proclaimeth. Behold, I sit unraveled therein, but vanity is beyond them all. Now I'm going to get into this chapter later on. I want to talk about the day because the day is known as Remembrance Day for the Moorish Americans. But I want to read this chapter because Drew Ali told us in verse 1 that vanity is beyond them all. And we know that there are foes that we have to overcome. That's why he gave us the tools of the workshop of the mind, where things are made of thought and where we build up character. Like Jesus. When Jesus was working with his Father as a carpenter, and he said that these tools remind me of the ones that we handle in the workshop of the mind. In chapter 6, it said when you first saw Jesus, it said Jesus was climbing up a ladder, and he had three things in his hand on which was the compass, the square, and the axe. And in order for us to get this vanity out of us, which is beyond them all. I don't care what foes you got. Vanity, Drew Ali say right here, is beyond them all. And we are all full of vanity. And we're going to get into this, but I want to talk about Remembrance Day first because the day is Remembrance Day. Praise Allah and honor to the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. What is Remembrance Day? Well, Remembrance Day is something that the Moorish Americans have that nobody else have. And the reason why that is because the Moorish American Muslims have a history that nobody else have. Now, I'm not going to say if you ain't with this temple, or you with this temple, or you with this temple, you don't know the remembrance because truth don't change. What was, is, and evermore to be. So let's talk about remembrance. We all understand through scientific study and investigation that Washington, D.C. was not always where the White House was. We know that the first White House was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and where the Moors was today at 6th and Chestnut Street, we call that Independence Hall. And the first 7 articles of Confederation, known today as the Constitution, this is where the signs manifested from. Now, we have to understand when we're talking about Moorish Science Temple of America, because we're not talking about a Negro issue, a colored issue, nor are we talking about a black issue. We are talking about this flag right here, the red flag with the 5-pointed green star in the center. At 6th and Chestnut Street, during this date, this is when George Washington made a statement. He said, I must not tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. And talking about chopping down the cherry tree, the reason why he used the signs of the cherry tree because of its red and because of its green. And this is then where George Washington took this flag down. It was no longer flying in Morocco. When he took this flag down in Morocco, then you seen the French and you seen the Spanish. And the reason why it was taken down, because you and I was no longer speaking about our national name that we first had when we was brought to these shores in the early part of the 17th century. Because when we went into Spain, we went into Spain as Moors. When we went into Spain as Moors, we gave Europe civilization. Check the record. Showed them how to walk, showed them how to talk, showed them how to bathe, and even showed them how to pray. And we would have took over the whole Europe, but that dude, Charles Montel, one of the things that Charles Montel did was put his woman on me, and he put his brother on me. And Charles Montel was so vicious, we couldn't take over the whole Europe. We call him the Hammer. So when you begin to talk about Remembrance Day, this is when, now, that guy named John Hancock, when everybody was signing all these particular documents, this guy was so bold, he stepped out there and made his signature bigger than everybody else's. And what do they say from that? They say, sign your John Hancock. So what took place at 6th and Chestnut Street, Independence Hall, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when the first 7 Articles of Confederation, known today as the Constitution of the United States, this is when the Moors was put in perpetual slavery. Now, I want to read something, and then I'm going to move on with it. And what I'm about ready to read, you'll hear nowhere else but here in the Moorish Science Temple of America. Noble Ali gave us what is known as our Constitution, and it is the divine Constitution and bylaws. And he told us in Act 6, it reads on this wise: with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are a part and a partial of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names was given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live in the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Jew Ali the prophet to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. The Moabites. My brother out of Atlanta just come out with this book a couple of weeks ago. And the title of this book is Ruth. Ruth the Moabite. And I was so happy that the brother came out with the book, because when you begin to talk about Ruth the Moabite, you have to talk about Boaz. You have to talk about King David. You have to talk about Solomon, because Ruth the Moabite from Africa is the wife of Boaz and is the grandparents of Solomon and David. So now, when we begin to talk about Solomon and David, they wrote the Psalms. And we talk so much about this on this plane because Drew Ali asked us, will you give in brief the line genealogy through which Jesus came? And the answer is, some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham, Boaz by Ruth. Let me hold up right there. After Abraham is Boaz by Ruth. Then he say Jesse. Then he say King David. Then he say Solomon. Then he say Hezekiah. But after Hezekiah, then it's Joseph by Mary. Now, we listen to this. So when we say Joseph by Mary, it's telling us that when David and Solomon wrote the song, Jesus was not even born yet. But when we begin to talk about the 23rd song or the 27th song, and we talk about Jesus, we're looking at Jesus as being the Lord. But if Jesus wasn't born yet, Solomon and David, when they was talking about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, or the Lord is my light and my salvation, they were talking about God. They were talking about God because God is Lord. However, the book tells us that once we begin to master the science and begin to use the tools of the workshop of the mind, then he say, man is the Lord of the plane of things made manifest. So you and I, brothers and sisters, because when you begin to talk about the sister, see, we want to understand that. When you begin to talk about woman, woman is spelled like this, W-O-M-A-N. That's how you spell woman, W-O-M-A-N. But once a sister become conscious, when you spell woman, you take that W of woman and turn it upside down. And when you turn it upside down, you get mo man. So the only difference between man and woman is their duty. A woman don't walk in front of man. She don't walk behind man. She walk side by side. And then when you understand the science of walking side by side, then you could talk about the yin and you could begin to talk about the yang. Because it said be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and one without the other is but half. So when we begin to talk about nationality, when we begin to talk about remembrance, what we have to understand is going back to the lesson about Esau and going back to the lesson about Jacob. Because who in the history of mankind lost a nationality other than you and me? Over 2,000 years ago, Chinese was Chinese. Over 2,000 years ago, Germans were Germans. Over 2,000 years ago, no telling what I was. First, I was a Negro. And we know that Negro is a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. This is what Noble Drew Ali told us. He told us that Negro was a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. But when I got my studies together, and when I got the people that work with me to find out some things, we come to find out that the Negro River is not in the place today that you call Africa. See? And that is because of the Berlin Conference. When the Berlin Conference came through, they took and divided Africa up in different parts, and certain other places that we used to have, we no longer have no more. Just like they moved us out and moved other people in. So now, one of the things that the Europeans done when they were beginning to talk about the Berlin Conference is just like in the Bible, in Deuteronomy 18:18, it say whenever a nation is in need for a prophet, Allah will send one. I want to talk about that. However, when you look in the Holy Quran of Mecca, the book that Noble Drew Ali got legally established in this government, in Surah 33, Ayat 40, it says that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. But now this is the only time that this is transpiring in the history of mankind, because one book say whenever a nation is in need, Allah will send one, and then another book say ain't no more coming. Allah not going to send no more. He don't care what done took place with you and I during the advent of slavery. He don't care. We coming through the Middle Passage, lost our nationality and our divine creed. Allah is not going to send us nobody to redeem us from that which was lost. And I see brothers who look just like me, come through the Middle Passage, just like me. They'll say that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. And when they put that in there, that makes sense to me. It really makes a lot of sense to me, because when I say, well, you give in brief the line genealogy through which Jesus came, the first name I come up with was Abraham. Now, we know Abraham was not always Abraham. He first was Abram, and then he became Abraham. And he became Abraham when he found grace in the eyes of God. And at this time, Abraham wanted a baby. But his wife Sarah at that time, because later on she had one, Sarah was not able to have children. So Abraham had a handmaid from Egyptian, looked just like me. Her hue was just like mine. And Abraham laid with his handmaid Hagar, and they had a child. And the child's name was Ishmael. Ishmael is the father of the Arabian nation. And more times than not, we always post to let you see what the original Arabians look like. The original Arabians look like somebody from Africa, because Africa and Egypt is the same place. They tell us that it's something different. I just like the White House, Washington, D.C., is inside of the United States. Now, because it's the White House, you might say that the White House is not a part of the United States, but yes, it is. Washington, D.C. is a part of the White House. So now, Drew Ali, he came and told us about the first Articles of Confederation, which known today as the Constitution. So this is why we're in, the Moorish Americans are in Philadelphia right now. We're in there to celebrate the remembrance of what our forefathers went through the advent of slavery. And this is when all of the Europeans came together and wiped us out of the plane of things made manifest. What do I mean about at this thing that took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, they wiped us out? When they took away your national name, that meant that you had no place on earth. Remember the lesson where it say, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God Allah has given thee. So when we begin to talk about honoring our father, who is our father? Our father is the great God Allah. Now I hear a lot of other people, they say, Drew Ali my father. Drew Ali, nah. Jesus my father. Nah. Drew Ali and Jesus say, I'm your brother man. I just come to show the way to Allah. Praise Allah, the Holy One. So when we begin to talk about Drew Ali, he is our brother. Because when you study the Moorish American prayer, it say Allah is the father of the universe, not man. Now, I was looking at a piece of literature that we have in the Moorish Science Temple of America. And Noble Drew Ali asked us a question. You know what I mean? Let's look at this in the Moorish Holy Quran. Drew Ali said something in our literature. And he said that the last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared divinely in due time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. So it say the last prophet. He's telling us that the last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali. So now, Noble Drew Ali came. He came to hook us back up with the families of nations. He came to redeem us from that which was lost. So when he did that, that meant that the book, the Bible. Now we know about James Stewart and the King James Version, and we know that the King James, his name is James Stewart, and we know that he sat with Ferdinand, Isabella, Vespucius, and all of those that put us in perpetual slavery, these were the brothers, these were the Europeans that he was moving with. So he was a part of that. And anybody that did not accept his version of the Bible, he got rid of. And with this flag here, because they was able to take this flag down in Morocco. So we have to understand, when you look at Morocco today, Moors are not in Morocco. The people that you see in Morocco look nothing like me. And why is that? Because of the Berlin Conference. You have to understand that during the Berlin Conference, just like over in Arabia, they move them in and move them out. They move them in and they move them out. That's just like right here in Portland. Right here in Portland, Oregon, you move them, you coming back in Northeast, and you're moving all the Asiatics back out to Southeast. And this is what transpired during the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference was when the European nations came together. And look, one of them say they got gold here, they got this here, they got that there, and they came together to divide it. And when they divided, they started taking our product, what we was given in Africa, and start sharing it with one another. I just seen on the news that one of the companies in the East said they're going to stop giving people oil. Because, see, from the East comes all light. The only thing that we see that they have in Europe is wheat and hay. Allah blessed us with a lot of other different things. The same thing with the religion. Allah blessed our forefathers with this. Now, a lot of brothers and a lot of sisters, we have a lesson in the Moorish Science Temple, and they be singing it too. They say, I ain't no stranger now, 'cause I've been introduced it to the Father and the Son. I ain't no stranger now. So now, I am of the same blood of my ancestors. And being that I'm of the same blood of my ancestors, that meant that I am of that spirit. See, it say try the spirit, test the spirit, and see are you from the same spirit. You might have a biological brother from the same mother. You might have a biological sister from the same mother, but it's a different thought pattern. They do not think like our forefathers thought. So what you supposed to do? Say that your brother or your sister from your biological mother and your biological father, say that you with a brother or a sister that's in the Moorish Science Temple of America. And your biological brother or your biological sister is in dispute with the Moorish American. But the Moorish American is right. And your biological brother or your biological sister is wrong. What do you supposed to do? Well, my mother told me that we always be with our brothers and our sisters no matter if they right or no matter if they wrong. If your mother told you that, if your father told you that, they're wrong. Because the higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right. And if the higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right, then you got to be in your higher self and go with what the truth is about man. See? Because it's foolishness to try to impart it to the ignorant. Why? Because you are not the body nor the soul, but you don't know that. You're a spirit and a part of Allah. So we all say that we are spirits. But what spirit are we? Are you a carnal spirit? Are you a lustful spirit? Are you a negative spirit? Are you divine spirit? Yes, you are spirit, and it is your spirit that actuate and direct the flesh. So when I'm walking around in my higher self, then my higher self is directing this flesh. If I'm walking around in my lower self, then my lower self is directing the flesh. Ruth, the Moabite, Boaz is the brother that she married. Now listen to this. Ruth married Boaz. And from that union came Jesse, King David, and Solomon. These are they that hooked us back up with the family of nations. Because before then, we was wishing the carnal customs and the mere ideas of man, things that have never done us any good, but has always harmed us. So we were saved by Ruth, by her marrying Boaz. That union brought us back into the spirit of the great God Allah, because we were doing everything that was diametrically opposed to what God said. I met a brother today, and he said that he was a moorish American. And he told me that everybody else other than him was right. You know how that lesson go on? Everybody is out of step except my son, 100 men walking. And one person is out of sync. And then she said, everybody out of step except my father or my son. Now, a brother asked me this. He said, we got all this paperwork going on. Now, here's a picture here in this book. I want to show it to you. Here's a picture of Sister Pearl Ali that the brother have in this book. Sister Pearl Ali's funeral was Saturday, May the 14th, 1994. Let's listen to that again. 1994 is when Noble Drew Ali's wife passed on. I posted a picture of a sister here not too long ago, out of Sister H. Graves Eel out of the East Coast. And she was like 90-something years old. And her and the prophet's wife was real close. So now we got to start asking ourselves something. What grand body was Pearl Ali with when she passed on? I remember I got a picture. Brother Foster Eel, Thaddeus Foster Eel, that sent me a picture of Sister Drew Ali with Sister Price Bey, because this was just before Price Bey had passed on. And he sent me the picture because they took him back in. The grand body of C. Kirkman Bey took Sister Christina Price Bey back in because everybody else had crossed her. She was struggling and on her own, and they took her in and made her a part. So the reason why I'm posting all these different pictures, because we calling a lot of names out today. I hear a lot of brothers calling a lot of names out and saying that there's paperwork. And if you don't have this paperwork, you're not with the prophet. Let me share this with you. There's a lot of other paperwork you haven't seen. And when you begin to talk about the paperwork of the letters of 1933 and the letters of 1934, I got letters too from other grand bodies. The same picture that you have, the same letters that you have, there's another grand body. And 1929, 1930, 1931, 1932, there are also letters that was written then that other grand bodies have. But you didn't see this one. They got a letter that was written up telling the Moors about Moorish home number 1. They had another letter written up talking about Moorish home number 2. They had another letter written up talking about Big Bertha. See, on Moorish home number 1, they had a Big Bertha, they had a truck. And this truck used to put vegetables and fruit and take it all to the Moors across the nation. That you haven't seen that paperwork, have you? Because certain people don't talk about paperwork. And anybody that showed Moorish Americans this paperwork, the reason why I'm talking about that, because we had a brother come to the temple this Friday, a Vietnam Army veteran. And I took to him because he had that PTSD just like I do. And I sit down and I talked to him, and he showed me an ID card. And he said that this ID card was the ID card he got when he become a member of the Moorish something. But I was showing him my nationality card. And when I showed him my nationality card, I said, this is the same nationality card that Sister Drew Ali had. This is the same nationality card that the Cook Bay brothers had. Now I have a black fez on. Back in the day, Drew Ali, I post that to everybody. Everybody know that the prophet took off his black feathers off his head and put it on one of the Cook Bay feathers. Then you hear other people talking about we don't wear black feathers because they got so scared, hiding under the ground, doing a lot of foolishness, and they got, whenever they seen the black feathers, they ran and tried to hide. So that's why you see a lot of different grand bodies. They don't wear black feathers. They don't wear it because they scared of the law. Now, if Drew Ali gave us a black feathers, then how somebody else that's not a prophet take it away? I know we got a lot of different prophets. We got prophet 1, we got prophet 2, we got prophet 3, we got prophet 4, and a brother that was in a meeting with us this morning said that he know but Drew Ali come again. So you're going to have a lot of different prophets, but see, we have something that is known as the Keistic Records. The Keistic Records is a universal mind. And in this Keistic Records, you'll find the Moorish Holy Quran. You'll find a lot of other lessons that's dealing with your mental capacity. And this is what Drew Ali brought to us. So in this Keistic Records, he tell us that every so many years, Allah will send us a prophet when needed. And he sent us Jesus. He sent us Muhammad. He sent us Buddha. And he sent us Confucius. You have a brotherhood and you have a prophethood. And when you begin to talk about the prophethood, you're talking about major and you're talking about minor prophets. And you're talking about Jesus, you're talking about Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius. But when you're talking about those 4 major prophets, they are the same reincarnated spirit. There's no difference in them spirit. They might have spoke a different language, and we know why they spoke a different language, because of the Tower of Babel, the confusion of the tongues. So today is a great day for the Moorish Americans. Today is a great day because Remembrance Day, and Drew Ali hooked us back up with the family of nations, told us that nationality was the order of the day. It said, did not we have a national name when first brought to these shores in the early part of the 17th century? If so, what was it? It was Moorish. It was Moorish then, and you are Moorish now. Now I said that you was Negro, but you're not colored. Colored is anything that has been painted, stained, varnished, or dyed. I was colored too. Now you heard about Martin Luther King, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So we was colored too. Then we was Negroes, colored, and now we black. Black, according to science, means death. You know how you go to a funeral? They don't do it today, but back in the day when you go to a funeral, everybody wore black because it symbolizes death. This fez I have on that's black, it don't symbolize death. It symbolizes justice, because justice is dealing upright, equal, and fair. So I want to give y'all some signs. If you see somebody and you want to know who is living according to the prophet's law, or who is the real Moor, all you got to do is look at their character. When you go to a church, I might be a member of the Church of God in Christ, and you might be a member of the AME Zion. And both of you say that you follow Jesus. But I never heard of AME Zion say that a Church of God in Christ was wrong, other than if your character is not right and you doing things that's opposed to what God said. Because the reason why I'm sharing this with you today is because the brother Hopkins Bey, out of the grand body of C. Kirkland Bay, they're in Philadelphia today. And they're having this remembrance celebration, and you have brothers and sisters from everywhere that's coming there honoring it. Some of them come there and honor. A lot of them go up there because I hear a lot of them that I seen up there today. Man, they talk so bad about C. Kirkland Bay. They talk bad about, but what you doing up there? Are you up there because of vanity? Vanity is beyond them all. Drew Ali told us that. Why are you up there? Because you ain't up there talking about subject matter. You're not talking about trying to bring this movement back under one head like the prophet left it. That's why you hear one talk about the 3630. You hear people talking about the great conspiracy. See, these are they that don't understand that the Moorish Science Temple of America is the Freedmen's Bureau. If you don't have a nationality, you can come to the Moorish Science Temple of America and get your nationality card. This is the purpose of the Moorish Science Temple. You know, when Frederick Douglass is the one that's supposed to have done this. Frederick Douglass was supposed to got this money, and what he's supposed to did was got a Freedmen's Bureau, and you and I supposed to went through there and got our 40 acres and our mule. But he was bought off with 2 different other ethers, and he didn't do his job. So Drew Ali had to come to redeem us from that which was lost. Everybody you meet always was who they are, and they didn't do no changing. We are the only people that names keep changing and we don't see the reason. Now, why are we Black Lives Matter? When we gonna come together? First of all, you're in the church. You're a Christian. You know that the foundation of Christianity began in Rome. This for my family, whoever else it is. I don't have no picks. You know it was the Roman nation that found the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth for seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. You know that when you look in the book of Jeremiah, it tells you about the Christmas tree, but you still supporting that holiday. You know that October, Halloween is on the way, and you're going to celebrate that holiday. You know that November is coming, and when you begin to talk about the pilgrims, and when you begin to talk about the Canaanites, because those who you call Indians are the Canaanites, and Jesus himself was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and the Moabites and the inhabitants of Africa. Seeking to redeem his people in those days, Rome crucified him according to their law. So now you accept the holidays. The only thing you're supposed to be accepting right now is their last name. And that's only because of the reparation that we have coming. Drew Ali said we have a reparation coming under this name. That's why in our holy day I had to reiterate when you look at the back of our questionnaire. Now I know you don't want to honor, you know more than the prophet, because a brother told me too that he wrote a book and got the prophet's picture on the front of the book. And the reason why he wrote the book, so we will be able to understand the prophet a little better. Because right now, brother said, well, you can write. The book is already written. I'm trying to understand the book. He said, if you'd have needed any more, I would have bought you that too. So I don't have to write a book. And the bad thing about it, you ain't gonna be able to understand this anyway. Because finite mind cannot comprehend things infinite. I had a little young brother. And this little young brother, he might be an old man now. But I call him a young brother because he's a lot younger than me. His name was Cornelius Cook-Bey. His mother's name was Salome. And Salome was functioning at that time up there in the Midwest. And with the brother, he was the chairman of the Moorish Science Temple at this time, Brother Tyson Bey. And Brother Cornelius Cook-Bey, because he used to share some things with me, and I was honored because I had seen a lot of it, and a lot of it I hadn't seen. And Cornelius Cook-Bey told me about the brother, that Noble Drew Ali put the black feathers on his head, and his brother. And he said that they be in Sunday school sometime, and they would be not arguing, but disputing the law. And one said that the prophet said this. He said, no, the prophet said that. And you know what that was? It gave me a good understanding, because the gifts of the understanding are the treasures of Allah. As man unfold, his God unfold. And man's God today, tomorrow, may not be his God. So when we begin to study these lessons for ourselves, because every round gets higher and higher when you're talking about claiming Jacob's ladder, they talking about levels of consciousness. That's why when you look at Noah's Ark, and when you look at Noah's Ark, they were saying on Noah's Ark, they came many cubits high. What are those cubits high that they're talking about of Noah's Ark? The cubits high is levels of consciousness. So as a man unfold, his God unfold. Man God today, tomorrow may not be his God. That's why, brothers, you have to understand, sisters, you have to understand. You might see a brother today. You might see a sister today. You might don't see them no more for 3-4 years. But when you see them again, you got to listen to them because they might not be that same person. You know, we have lessons that we have overcome. We got tests that we have to pass. And as you unfold, then your God unfold. Your God today might not be your God tomorrow. Because I know a brother, his God today was his Cadillac car. And somebody sit on his car and he gonna kill him. But if somebody smack his daughter, he ain't gonna do nothing. So we have to understand that as a man unfold, his God unfold, and we don't hear the same thing at the same time. Most of the brothers I met, most of the sisters I met, when you hear them explaining their understanding about the prophet, they're not exercising their own senses. They're going by what they heard somebody else say, and they're quoting what somebody else said instead of getting into this literature for themselves. Stop trying to act like somebody else. Stop trying to be like somebody else, because the prophet say, know thyself. But when you look, when you got little brothers, the little sisters, the friends, and they got friends, all of them get up there and they quote just alike. They got the same narratives. They got the same salutation because but I'm saying, be yourself. Be your higher self. Because really, it ain't but one self. We're always talking about hide yourself. You know how your lower self is. Because your lower self is your carnal self. Is your body of desires. Is a reflection of higher self distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. And we talking about murky ethers. Now, when you begin to talk about the ether is something they say that you can't see. Ether is something like the perfumes and the odors. But then again, there is an ether. There is a real dense ether. And the real dense ether is this flesh in which I come to you. But it's thy spirit that actuates and directs the flesh. The flesh, the spirit that's directing me now wasn't directing me yesterday. And the spirit that's directing me today, tomorrow, is not going to be that same spirit, because as man unfolds, his God unfolds. So in this Remembrance Day, we have to understand that Ruth was the Moabite. And when you begin to talk about the Moabite, then you're going back to the land of Moab. When you talk about Moab, you're talking about moorish order is the Asiatic business. And we're talking about the Asiatic business right now, because we got to go back to Asia, because there was a time when Europe was not even in existence. There was a time when there was no one known as a European. It wasn't there. That's why in your Bible, when you went to church this morning and your preacher was reading from the Bible, he was talking about the 7 churches. But when he was talking about the 7 churches, he wasn't talking about the 7 churches that was in Europe. And the reason why that was because Europe was not even in existence. He's talking about the 7 churches that was in Asia. And you know what Drew Ali said? He said, from the east comes all light. And he said, though the sun is hanging at high noon, the blind cannot see the light. The same as the Islamic creed brought to the Asiatic of North America by Prophet Noble Drew Ali. I talked to this young person the other day, and they was telling me, somebody told them about C. Kirkland Bey. I'm going to tell you, brothers and sisters, something. You don't even know who C. Kirkland Bey is. You don't know the history because you wasn't there. The elders didn't tell you about that history. But when you begin to quote, and when you begin to talk about another Moor and that you don't know nothing about, and you don't have the wisdom enough to check out his work, you can't tell me about C. Kirkland Bey, or you can't tell me about Millie Hill. Because when I look at those 2 brothers, those that was over there originally with C. Kirkland Bey, they still over there today. And those that used to be over there with C. Kirkland Bey, what took place was they done stole the money, got caught doing this, and got caught doing, so you left and you went somewhere else. And when you go somewhere else, you start talking about those that was over there. So you really want unity? The way we get unity, because Jew Ali say it ain't but one prophet, one temple, and one nation. Where you started at, go back there. That's what you need to do. If you don't, then vanity is beyond them all. You don't really want unity, because if you really want unity, you know people everywhere. I hear you talking about this sheik, and I hear you talking about that sheik. But me, I was back there. I was back there before a lot of you. All these new grand bodies, it shouldn't be. Go back. Go back where you are, where you're supposed to be now, to Hawker Bay. I like that brother. He said something, and out of all the stuff he said when we was in a conversation, he said that Taj Tariq Bey, he said the stuff that he's teaching is good and it has its place. And that goes for everybody that's on social media. All you have to do is go get with the Grand Sheik, the original one, because the truth of the matter is, I didn't want to call his name, but C.M. Bey, the brother G.S. Hatchet Bey, out of Washington, D.C., that started Temple 71 up there, see, he knew Brother Scott Ill. My other teacher knew Brother Scott Ill. And all these brothers used to be with that brother C.M. Bey. And at that time, C.M. Bey was a member of Temple 21 in New York City. So when you begin to check the records, you could find that. I was telling the brother the other day, we have more in the Moorish Temple. We talk about astrology, and that brother taught a lot about that. We talk about mathematics too, because mathematics don't lie. When you begin to talk about mathematics, where do it come from? It come to Egypt. I just like Jew Ali told the Moors to get a good European education and he'd be able to use them. The first thing I did, I run the school to become a doctor. I run the school to become a mathematician. I run the school to become a lawyer, and I come to find out that that wasn't European. Because when you begin to talk about Egypt, you're talking about mathematics. You're talking about medicine, you know, because when you talk about Akhenaten and Imhotep, these are the fathers of medicine. When you begin to talk about the religion, the monotheist religion, so you got monotheism and you have polytheism. Polytheism is the belief in more than one God. Monotheism is a belief in one God. Now, a lot of us say that we believe in Allah, the great God of the universe, but we don't. Because I heard the sheik say the other day, he said, when you with this mob, you act one way. Then when you with this mob, you act another way. When you're over here, you're a Muslim. And when you're over here, you're a gangster. You can't serve both of them at the same time. You can't straddle the fence. You can't serve two masters at the same time. So when you begin to talk about the higher self and when you begin to talk about the lower self, these are two masters. They are mastermind because they mastering whatever mind that they're in. So you say that you a mastermind. A master is one who can master his mind. So how do you master your mind? Well, when you begin to master your mind, then you become like Jesus in chapter 6. So when you first saw Jesus, he was climbing up a ladder and he had three things in his hand. And the three things that he had in his hand was the compass, the square, and the axe. And we use the compass to draw a circle around our passion and desires to keep them in the bounds of righteousness. Use the square to measure all our lines, to straighten out the crooked places of the way, to make the corners of our conduct square. And we use the axe to cut away. Now, what do we cut away when we use the axe? We cut away the strip clubs. We cut away that all those things that we doing that we do with somebody else and not with our own wife. We gonna cut away all those things that bring unrest, misery, and death. That's what we're going to cut away. We're going to take the axe symbolic and cut away all those things that's no good for our character. And then you'll see our head above the trees of the forest. See? Because if you're not living according to Jurali, you can't see your head above the trees of the forest. So it's always an honor, a pleasure, Moreover, duty to be able to come before our Portland listening audience to talk about the last prophet in these days and times, Prophet Noble Drew Ali. In conclusion, I would like to recite the Moorish American prayer because this is the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Drew Ali came for me. He had me on his mind. And I'm so glad he came for me. I'm so glad he came for me. And I'm so glad he came for me. I'm so glad he came for me.